the digital divide. We've been talking about that for 20, 30 years. It is no longer a hardware issue for a lot of America. In your mind, do I believe that this stuff is for me? Or is it for someone else? Is it for the white folks? Is it for the rich folks? You look at some of these African-American communities, Latino communities, overlooked, underestimated. What if you gave those communities the most creative tools ever imagined and told them, this is not a hand grenade, this is a jetpack for you? But that's what I'm saying, man. It's not a smart issue, it's a heart issue.
I'm Bob Safian, and I'm here with Van Jones. Van, thanks for joining us.
I'm glad to be here, brother.
You've been busy, as always, especially with the presidential race dramatically shifting over the last month.
Oh, did something happen?
Yeah. Did you hear that there's nonsense going on?
Listen, I've been on television now for 12 years. I helped to cover the 2012 election, the 2016 election, 2020, and now 2024. So I've seen good debate performances, bad ones. I was on set when Obama, crapped the bed, but I've never seen anything like that. And then we come out and they go right to my panel. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to say. The guy was the first person to read the handwriting on the walls and not pretend that it was something that it wasn't.
You were saying what everybody was thinking, right?
Yeah, it really is crazy, Bob. And you think about these stories like the emperor's new clothes and that type of stuff. Like nobody would possibly pretend that an emperor had on a beautiful robe if he's actually butt naked. And it's like, well, nobody would actually pretend that the president of the United States, is ready to go for 5 more years in office when he's not. And then suddenly, ding, he's out, and ding, he's for Kamala, and ding, Kamala goes from being cringe to being cool in 24 hours. She goes from being like, this kind of like, do we have a vice president? Where is she? To like Beyonce in a week. And it's like, no, so this is completely different, sir, than any other thing I've had to cover.
And in the meantime, while you're doing this, you're also launching a new initiative, this Dream Machine Innovation Lab, to address the impact of AI on underrepresented communities. Like, is there a connection for you between what's going on in the political world and what's going on in the tech world?
There's a big connection, because if you're waiting for politics and politicians to fix this stuff, you're going to be waiting for a long time. I think in the last century, you could be excused for having a more state-oriented, government-oriented view of change, because in the last century, you had politicians, political figures, Churchill, JFK, FDR, Dr. King. These were political people who were either politicians or protesters trying to make governments work better, try to get the New Deal done so working families have some support, trying to get civil rights and women's rights done so that we really all can be seen as created equal. These are all the tasks of government. What political figure is there on the world stage right now that you think is up to the task of even being a good dog catcher or city council member? I mean, it is, compared to the challenges that we're facing, catastrophic global warming, the rise of all these authoritarian governments, the United States kind of falling all over itself and infighting, and the political class is not up to this fight. Meanwhile, who are the people who are really shaping tomorrow? It's not the politicians, it's the technologists. The technologists are the ones who are basically creating a new human civilization right before our eyes. Look, I've got, for my first marriage, I got 2 kids, one's in college, one's in high school. But I've also, in my new relationship, I've got 2 little babies, 2.5 years old and 6 months old. By the time they're my age, they will be living in a different human civilization. Their first crushes or best friends might be AIs. When it's time for them to have kids, they might use biotech tools to design their kids. They might be buried on the moon or on Mars. All of that is different than where I grew up. I was born in 1968. This is all Jetson stuff. And yet, that's what's being created. Now, my local congressperson has very little leverage on that. I'm sorry. There's about 10,000 people in the AI community They're going to have a much bigger impact on all of that than any 10,000 politicians. And so that's why will.i.am and I got together and said, let's launch a campaign to try to get the next generation of young minds, especially from Black and Brown and other overlooked communities, get them focused on AI. So we have a campaign called Make Wakanda Real, trying to excite the imagination of young people. What if you could use all these technology tools to solve problems? Wakanda being the incredibly technologically advanced super nation in the superhero universe of Marvel. What if you could make that real? And so it's a vote of confidence in the future, in that we think that technology can be used for good.
If the driving force of creating this future is tech, like Black representation in tech, Black people make up maybe 8% of employees and like 3% of tech C-suite executives.
It's bad. It's bad. And it's dangerous. It's dangerous. It's not, it's terrible for the poor Black people, though it is. Oh, it's terrible for the Native Americans and whatever, yeah, though it is. It's terrible for everybody. The last time we let one little group determine human civilization, we had 400 years of slavery, colonialism, environmental destruction. You don't want that. You want the next time you build a civilization to include everybody, because you want a new human civilization that is more in harmony with itself and the planet that we call home. And that can't be created by one little group of people. That's got to be co-authored by a lot of people. But I'll tell you this, and this will get me in trouble with some of my liberal friends. At least at the consumer level, we call it the digital divide. We've been talking about that for 20, 30 years. It is no longer a hardware issue for a lot of America. I'm not saying you don't have some deserts. You do have some housing projects. You do have some neighborhoods that are still not online. You got to deal with that. But increasingly, it's no longer a hardware problem. Most people have a smartphone. They could download ChatGPT.
Yeah.
They could download Midjourney.
Yeah.
It's not so much a hardware problem. It's a wetware problem. It's in your mind, in your brain, in between these two ears. Do I believe that this stuff is for me? Do I believe that this technology is supposed to be in my hands? Or is it for someone else? Is it for the white folks? Is it for the rich folks? That's a wetware problem. Is it corny or is it cool? That's a wetware problem. And so we're trying to have a campaign that says, you look at some of these African-American communities, Latino communities, Native American, overlooked, underestimated, Appalachia. You've got creative people. You've got resilient people. You've got grit. You've got determination. You've got innovative people. What if you gave those communities the most creative tools ever imagined and told them, this is not a hand grenade. This is a jetpack for you. You don't have to go to 4 years of college and then go beg somebody for a bunch of capital. A lot of what you're doing now is you're replacing capital with code.
But that group they have to believe it, right? They have to believe it to grab that.
But that's what I'm saying, man. It's not a smart issue, it's a heart issue. You got a lot of smart people, but do they have that self-belief? Do they have that self-confidence?
So much of the discussion about AI and underrepresented communities has been about like that AI is developed, like not in a particularly inclusive way, or AI regulation and bias. And it doesn't sound like that's necessarily what you're obsessed with. Not that you don't think maybe that should be addressed, but that it's more about just getting folks in those communities to feel like, yeah, this is something that's cool for me to make part of my life.
I'm glad you pointed this out, because Dr. King, my great hero, he would have been very concerned about everything you just said. He would have stood up and said, we want equal protection from racially biased algorithms. We want equal protection from racist robots. We want equal protection from job displacement. But he wouldn't have stopped there. He also would have wanted equal opportunity, equal access to the good stuff. See, that's what's been missing. Is, Dr. King didn't say, I have a critique. You know what I mean? Like, I have a set of concerns. That's not the thing, He had a dream. He had a vision. He had and I think you got to be on both sides of the conversation. Equal protection from bad stuff, but equal opportunity, equal access, equal excitement, equal cultural momentum on the good stuff. Because look at the Black community when it comes to technology. Yes, you can say we don't participate in Silicon Valley, and we definitely don't, and we need to do more. And yet, we took 2 turntables and a microphone in the Bronx
Mm-hmm.
and created hip hop, which is now bigger than any other musical genre. That was technology. Kids literally would hack streetlights to be able to have these block parties with 2 turntables and a microphone. And somebody would get on and say, what a hip, a hop, a hippity hip. And suddenly you had hip hop, and it is now the dominant cultural force in the world. So if you could do that with that little bit of technology, what does that same community do with Midjourney, with ChatGPT, with Sora? We have no idea what could come. And so I just want to make sure that somebody's on the opportunity side of this thing.
I'm curious, how do you educate yourself about AI? Like, do you spend a lot of time playing with these different tools?
Yeah, though I suck, man. It's a different mindset. Prompting, like trying to like ask this goddamn thing the right questions, and like I'm not, I think a different kind of a brain is gonna figure out that dance, it really is a tango.
You got to learn the steps, right?
Yeah, you got to learn the steps. I took an MIT course on machine learning online. It was horrible for my self-esteem. I'm used to doing pretty good in classroom settings. It was like trying to learn a foreign language in a foreign language. But it showed me there's nothing to be scared of. It's just another tool. It can get out of hand, sure, but I mean, everything else we invented can get out of hand. Bioweapons, nuclear weapons, social media. I mean, anything can get out of hand. But there are people who, if they had a laptop and they could get online and they had a couple extra hours in the evenings instead of watching, TikTok all day, could create beautiful stuff, could solve really important problems, could become incredibly valuable people. And I just want that to at least be an option, Bob, because look, you know why you have never, ever in your life gone to McDonald's and ordered sushi? First of all, it'd be nasty. It'd be horrible. You'd probably get sick.
It'd be nasty. Yeah.
Exactly. But also, sushi is not on the menu. It's not on the menu.
Right.
So you never order something that's not on the menu. I'm just trying to put the positive part of AI on the menu for overlooked, underestimated communities. And I believe that some of those folks are going to do stuff that blows everybody's minds.
Earlier this year, Reid Hoffman came on my show after he'd met with Joe Biden about AI, and Reid shared some of what Biden's perspective on emerging tech is. But when I asked Reid, like, he doesn't really know how Harris thinks about AI. Do you have any clear sense of that from her personally, from her team?
I'll say 2 things about it. One is I don't know, and I've known Kamala. I've known the vice president for 25 years. We came up together in San Francisco politics. First of all, if you had told me even a month ago that she would be more popular than Taylor Swift, I would have said, in what universe is that possible? And I don't know what she thinks about this in particular. What I do know is that she's from the Bay Area, and Joe Biden is not. So she grew up next door to Silicon Valley. She's a different generation. A lot of her donors and supporters, her entire career, have been Silicon Valley. And so Kamala knows a bunch of people in Silicon Valley. She's known them for a long time. I can't help but imagine that won't have a big impact on how she thinks about this stuff, as opposed to lunch bucket Joe Biden from another century on another coast.
You've been part of a bunch of different enterprises addressing criminal justice reform, clean energy. They haven't been particularly central in this campaign. It seems more like it's focused on like law and order and economic growth. Like, does that frustrate you?
I understand the waves and the currents and the motions and stuff like that. And so sometimes your issue is hot and sometimes it's not. Unfortunately, the issues become so polarized that if you're a Democrat, you're talking about climate change, you're wasting your time because anybody who's agrees with you on that's going to vote for you anyway. And you're just going to piss off people in the middle who might, not know which way to go. And no Republican can own the issue. I remember when this issue was more of a dumb versus smart issue than a left versus right issue. But for me, look, I wish we were talking about much deeper issues in general. I think we have a real spiritual crisis in the country. People are hurting, man. I think people feel lost. I think people feel very, very concerned, afraid about the future. I think people feel increasingly anxious about other people. Like, I don't think the word neighbor means the same thing that it did when I was growing up. I mean, half the time you don't know who the hell your neighbor is. Maybe you got some app, looking out, making sure, the neighborhood doesn't have some bad person in it. That's not the same. The world's changing, man. I mean, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, they've got our number, and they're messing with us. You're gonna have to really be willing to love and defend this country. I mean, not just from in a right wing cigar chomping. I'm a patriot, and if you don't like America, get the hell out of here. Like that's great, but I mean, if you're a vegan lesbian, with face piercings and tattoos, you're gonna have to get out that American flag. If these authoritarians win, the next quarter of the century, some of the stuff we take for granted can go away. I'd rather talk about that in those terms, not talk about that in terms of, well, you're a dummy, but we need to come together as a country about some of this stuff.
And instead, everything gets to be divisive, right? Like, I mean, in the last few weeks, being a parent, entered the conversation with JD Vance critiquing Kamala Harris's identity as a step parent. I mean, you mentioned your children, and I know you have your two younger children are in this dynamic called conscious co-parenting. Like, has your personal experience of parenting impacted how you look at the conversations about parenthood in politics?
A little bit, but I mean, even if I didn't have this kind of very modern family arrangement with Noemi, if people don't know, I have a friend, and after COVID, we decided to have two kids together, and people thought that was really bizarre. But we call it conscious co-parenting, and it has its ups and downs. I wouldn't recommend it for everybody, but if you have a friend and somebody you trust and somebody you like, having kids is a lot like having a small business. In that, it's a lot of supply and demand and income and expenses and project management and a lot of HR. And so if there's somebody that you would start a small business with, that might be a decent enough person to start a modern family with. And that's really been our experience. But I just think that JD Vance, his insults against, women who don't have kids are really meaningless, trivial compared to his insistence that women do have kids that don't want to. His insistence that women have kids is much, much worse than his ridicule for women who don't have kids.
For this presidential election, there have been strong words on both sides about the repercussions if the other candidate is elected. What do you think's at stake in this election?
I really do think you have very stark differences between these candidates. There always are differences, but I think the direction of society is at stake. If the very worst potential in Donald Trump would come out in his next presidency, but I don't want to find out, because if it did, he's already tested and strained American institutions to the point of breaking. The worst of Kamala Harris would be more aid and comfort to really obnoxious people on the left who think they're better than everybody and talk down to people. That strikes me as survivable. The worst that comes from Kamala Harris is maybe too much government spending, maybe a tax policy that punishes innovation in a way, at least in the eyes of the innovators and the entrepreneurs. That sucks. But you can then hire somebody else to be president in 4 years and fix a lot of that stuff. The worst from Donald Trump, I don't know. Is it 50 years to fix, 20 years, 100 years? I mean, how do you fix that stuff? So I think it's very, very consequential.
The state of the electorate is part of what, makes me so anxious, that there are so many people who are, adamantly believe that one candidate is a crook, and and you can find lots of people on both sides who will make that argument about the other candidate. And I guess I was hoping that business leaders, would sort of take up the middle and kind of mend some of that. But it seems like that's kind of subsided, and business folks are just like, yeah, I don't want to piss anybody off.
I think that the business community, when Biden was clearly incapable of running and certainly incapable of serving, and the bite of taxes at the very, very top created a permission structure for a lot of people in the business community to move in directions that are just very scary to me. I mean, listen, Elon Musk, right? He was an Andrew Yang supporter in 2020. So 4 years ago, Elon Musk was supporting an innovation first Democrat. And now he's, clearly to the right of Trump, and I think imagines himself maybe being some kind of an oligarch in some, more authoritarian country. That is terrifying to me. I like Elon Musk when he's trying to figure out how to get to space and how to, make clean cars and how to get innovation in government going with Andrew Yang. That's a massive asset to humanity. I'd like to see a lot more of the old Elon Musk.
Well, power sometimes does strange things to people, right?
I'd like to find out if I get some more power. I'll let you know how it goes. But in the meantime, I just get to I get to talk about the people who do have it.
When you think about where we're headed for the rest of 2024, are you optimistic?
This is a year that people are going to talk about, like 68. You had a new technology that was showing young people things that they had never seen before and getting them all riled up, color television. You had an unpopular Democratic incumbent, Johnson, who didn't decide to go through with the election. You had a guy named Bobby Kennedy jump into the race in 68. You've got a guy named his son, Bobby Kennedy, jump into the race this year. You've got the Democratic convention in Chicago. I mean, it's literally like a glitch in the matrix. But to me, what I take away from it is a lot more is possible than we think. Kamala Harris is 59. She's almost 60 years old, and she's just now coming into herself, which means anybody in America can be that unpopped kernel that pops into a completely unexpected form. And no matter how bad things look for your company, for your health, for your family, for your democracy, tomorrow's a new day. You have no idea what's coming.
So much changed in a month. Like, what's going to change in the next month?
Who knows? Who knows? Expect the unexpected. The debate between Vice President Harris and Donald Trump. Don't assume that your person is going to win, because both of them have done well and poorly in debate situations. I say all that because it's true, and also I'm trying to keep our ratings up. So we'll see.
This has been great. Really, I appreciate it.
All right. To be continued. Thank you, brother.